These aren't divided by symbols. Those are actually just separating the problems out. So, all right. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to transform. So we're trying to do this into, it should be kx to the n power, the format for this. So first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to turn this cube root, not cubic root, cube root to a 1/3 power. So we're going to have x to the -4, and we're going to raise this to the 1/3 power. And then when you have a power to a power like this, what do you do? Someone want to help me out here? Yes, multiply. So then you're going to have x to the -4/3, and that's your final answer. Again, check what you did. Hopefully if you did the exit ticket, it matches what we have right here. The next one. All right, I'm going to keep the negative in front, and then I'm going to turn that cube root on the bottom to a 1/3 power. Okay, but we want the x to be on top, and it's right now it's on the bottom, it's in the denominator. We want to put that in the numerator. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it negative and throw it on top. And now it is in the form of kx to the n, so some constant k times x to some power n. So that is the answer from that one. All right, last one is the hardest one. It's not too bad. First thing I'm going to do is turn that cube root to a 1/3 power. Make sure you have the 8x to the third in parentheses for this. Something like that. Okay. So this involves a lot of the rules that we went over, so that's why it's the hardest one. All right, we have the 8 to the 1/3 power and the x to the third to the 1/3 power. So I'm actually going to write that down. 8 to the 1/3 power times x to the third to the 1/3 power. Here, you have a 4 here. Now, 8 to the 1/3 power, 8 is actually a perfect cube. So what I'm going to do is cube root this. I'm actually going to write this as a cube. Should have kept it like this originally. The cube root of 8 is 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So that's going to just be a 2. This one, we're going to multiply the 3 times 1/3, but those are just going to cancel essentially, because 3 times 1/3 is 1. So it's just going to be x to the first power here. Okay, you can't have any x's on the bottom though, because it has to be kx to the n. So I'm going to rewrite this to be x to the -1 here. And then the cube root of 8, as I said before, was 2. So this is going to cancel, divide the top and the bottom by 2, and your final answer should be 2x to the -1 power. All right, it is important to understand that cube root of 8 there, just because it is a perfect cube. If you wanted to, you don't have to write it as a cube root again. If you could just go, oh, 8 to the 1/3 power, that's 2. So we're going to write rational exponents, which again, just rational ratio fractions. So it's exponents that are fractions. Rational exponents and okay, the first one we're going to do, so we're just going to do a ton of example problems here. The first one is going to be b to the 1/4 times b to the 1/4, and I want, what is the radical form of this? I want this as a radical. Okay, we'll do this one together. All right, the exponent properties, if you remember, when you're multiplying them and it has the same base, you add the exponents together. So you should get b to the 2/4 power, which is equal to b to the 1/2 power, which is equal to, if you have a half power, it's the same thing as what? Square root of b, thank you. So we're going to do the square roots b, and that's the final answer. Okay, the second one is going to be b to the 1/3 times b to the 4/3. Okay. To solve this out, we're going to add a cross here. So 1/3 plus 4/3 is 5/3. Okay, but I want this in radical form. There's two ways you can do this. The way I like to do it is I just do b to the 5th, so b to whatever the top number is, and then all of that is raised to the 1/3 power. So what you can do for this is rewrite it to be that 1/3 power, to be the cube root, and then you just have b to the 5th. And that's the answer. Questions on this one? Pretty straightforward. Okay, this one is going to be a little trickier, but not by much. So it's going to be b to the 1/5 times b to the 3/4. Okay. If you are allowed to use your calculator, which you are in this class, and you do not want to deal with adding fractions and getting common denominators, then use your calculator and just do math frac. Okay, I'm going to show you how that looks right now. If you should know math frac by now. The math button and hit frac, right? All right, so what we can do is 1/5 plus 3/4, and then just do math frac, and it spits out the fraction. So this is going to be equal to b to the 19 over 20. Sorry, I did not pick very good numbers. So this would be b to the 19th power, and you're doing the 20th root of that. And that's the final answer, actually. All right, questions on that? All right, let's do, here we go. Oh, it doesn't look nice. So now this one's going to be more of just a radical one. 48 x to the 5th times y to the 4th times z squared. All right. This should be a review because I believe you've done this in previous classes, so it shouldn't be too bad. All right, first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to factor out that 48 completely because this is technically a square root, but there's a 2 there. Okay, if you actually go on your phone's calculator, you probably have seen this already. If you go on your phone's calculator and then you tip it to the side, it shows all those other functions. If you look at the square root, they actually put a 2 in there. They have a cube root with the 3, but they'll have a 2 in there for the square root. Usually they don't put the 2 in there. It's just blank, but it just means the same thing. It's a square root. What we're going to do is we're going to factor out this 48, which is going to be 2 times 24, which is equal to 2 times 2 times 12, which is equal to 2 times 2 times 2 times 6, which is equal to 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. Okay. It helps to kind of factor all that out, like separate from the actual problem, and then I'm just going to kind of throw it back up here. If something like that. That's just the 48. We still have to do the same thing with the x. It's x to the 5th. We're doing the square root of that. Times x to the 4th. We're doing the square root of that. And then z squared, square root of that. So I'm just kind of parsing everything out so it's a little bit easier to work with, to organize. Why keep it all together if you don't have to? Okay. Square root means what 2 factors are multiplied by each other. It's got to be the same factor here. So there's 2 sets of 2 here, so that you can pull out a 2 and then another 2, and then it's just the square root of 3 there. And you could write 2 times 2 is 4. We're going to do that eventually. Okay. This x to the square root of x right here, what I'm going to do for that one is actually just write it as x to the 5th to the 1/2 power. We're going to simplify that out in just a second. The y to the 4th is going to be raised to the 1/2 power. And then the z squared is also raised to the 1/2 power. Okay. Are there any questions on what I've done so far? And by the way, if you have your own method of doing this that you've learned from another teacher, then do it that way. I don't care. As long as you get the answer at the end, it's all that matters. Okay? And that your work is neat. So this is going to be 4 root 3. Okay, this right here, it's 5/2. So I'm going to write x to the 5/2. And what you can do is you can actually pull x's out of this because 5/2 is, I'll write it down here, is actually going to be equal to x squared times x to the 1/2. Okay, because 5/2 is 2.5. So here's the 2 and here's the 0.5. Okay, so you basically want to pull out any perfect squares that you can. X squared would be one of them from there. This one up here, it's just 4/2, which is just going to be y squared, so that's easy. Z squared, 2 times 1/2 here is just going to be 1. So that's just the z to the first there. And then we're going to drop down that 4 root 3. So you get something like this. This 1/2 power, you can turn this into a square root. So the final thing to do is just combine all the square roots. So it's going to be 4 times the square root of 3x, because this is a square root and this is a square root. The x squared comes down here, the y squared comes down, and the z comes down. And that should be your final answer right there. All right, let's do another one here. Let's do the square root of 8x to the 3rd y squared. And I want this simplified in radical form. The first thing I'm going to do is factor everything out. So we have the square root of 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. X to the 3rd, we're going to do the square root of that. I'm just going to write it as x to the 3rd to the 1/2 power. Times y squared to the 1/2 power. This one, there is a group of 2 there. So I'm going to pull that out and then just have 2 root 2. That's scary. Super windy over here. And this is y to the 1st, because when you multiply 2 and 1/2, you get 1. This is 3/2. That's how I got that. Okay, 3/2 can actually break down to 2/2 and 1/2. So that's kind of how we're going to break this down here. So this is going to be 2 root 2 times, this is going to be x to the 1 times x to the 1/2, because 1 plus 1/2 is 3/2. Okay, say you didn't want to do it that way, you can just keep it as a whole fraction and just do it like this, like kind of how I said it, where I was like 2/2 times x to the 1/2. Okay, because it's 3/2 if you add them. And then you can just see it's 2/2, it's 1. So if you want to break it down like that, you don't have to skip steps like I did. Times y. Okay, this is going to be 2 root 2 times x, because this is just x to the 1st, times the square root of x times y. And there's only one more step, and that's combining the square roots to one square root. So it's going to be 2xy times the square root of 2x. And this would be the final answer. I don't care the order of this. I just care that these square roots are together and that everything is simplified completely. Questions on this? All right, let's do one. The last two were square roots, so let's do one where it's like a cube root, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. So number 6, 54, y to the 7th, z squared. We're going to do the third root of this. Okay, first thing I advise doing is breaking down this 54 over here. So it's going to be 2 times 27. And then 27 is 3 times 9. 9 is 3 times 3. So you end up with 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. And then we're doing the cube root of this. There's your group of 3 right there, the 3 3s. The y to the 7th is going to be y to the 7th to the 1/3 power. The z squared is going to be z squared to the 1/3 power. From here, I'm going to combine all these here because it's the cube root of that. It's just going to be 3 times the cube root of 2. This right here, it's 7/3. So it's going to be y to the 7/3. And this is going to be z to the 2/3. And just like before, I'm going to break down this y to be 3/3. And then there's going to be a 4/3, but I'm just going to break that down into another 3/3, and then a y to 1/3. So 3 plus 3 plus 1 is 7/3. But what's cool is these cancel to be just 1. So now you have y squared and then that y to the 1/3 there. Let's bring this down. Z to the 2/3 doesn't break down to anything, so I'm just going to leave it like that. Okay, so your final answer should be 3, and then there's 2 y's, so I'm going to write y squared. And then it's the cube root. There's a 2 here. And then this is technically a cube root as well because it's to the 1/3 power, so I'm going to put a y in there. So it's a 2 and a y. And then this one is z squared. It's really just z squared to the 1/3 power, so I'm just going to put a z squared in here. It's all under the cube root. It's in radical form. So we're officially done with this one.